Thank you for coming by. And non-Googlers, there are a few of us here. I'm Samir. I am a recent addition to Google and work on the corporate development, i.e. the acquisitions team. We'll be moving to India later this year. That's a little bit about me. Dr. Jhunjhunwala, just a brief introduction. There are these institutes called IITs in India, the Indian Institutes of Technology. Some of you may be from there. Some of you may have heard of it. He was department chair and has been teaching in that institute for over 25 years. He's also an entrepreneur, and that's sort of his hobby, where he's helped many a company, especially for rural India. He'll talk to you about some of those stories. He's on the board of multiple companies, I think 15 over time, very involved with cellular and telecom policy. One of the awards that has been awarded to Dr. Jhunjhunwala by the president is the Padma Shri. It's a very coveted award in India. I thank him for taking time out of his busy schedule to give us a little bit of knowledge that he has about India and the opportunity it offers us in the near future. Dr. Jhunjhunwala.
Thank you very much. I've titled my talk, Leveraging India as India Stands Up, through innovations in technologies, business models, and policies. I'll largely talk about India. What are the things that are happening in India? What can happen in India? What are the challenges? I think many of the things that I'm talked about is relevant very much to Google, because I think what Google represents to at least us, outsiders, is the direction that India seems to be moving. And therefore, there is a lot of commonness. And I just thought that I'll still talk about India in this particular place. Do interrupt me as often as you want to, so that we can go interactive as I go ahead and talk. First, let me talk about what is this changing India that I'm talking about. This in India, changing India, I'm talking about the changes in last 12 to 15 years. India is a very different country than what I returned to in 1981. Why I'm sort of saying is that I returned at IIT Madras as a faculty, applied for a simple telephone line in Chennai, in Madras, the third largest city in the country, in the middle of the city. And it took me 8 years to get a telephone. This is the India that we used to know of. And suddenly, India has changed. And while talking about changing India, I always feel like starting with, to understand India, one needs to understand its billion people and where they are. And this slide, to some extent, captures it. This is a slide which shows the income levels for the about 65 million urban households and 135 million rural households. These are household incomes. And if you see the urban household, most of the incomes is around $200. If you talk about those with $1,000 plus, you are talking about hardly 2 to 3 million households. So really, if you want to do something in India, you need to be able to at least attend to those who are living here with $200 per month household income. Typical household is 5 people. Similarly, when you talk about 135 million rural household, almost 700 million people, you are talking about those with income between $60 to $100. My feeling is income level captures very well what can be done, what needs to be done, what is the direction that one has to move. It is this understanding that when we design products, when we design strategies, when we design what we need to do, it becomes tremendous sense as we keep this income in the mind. So it's a large market. 1 billion people is a large market, large country, but at the right price point. So what is this changing? This, probably the biggest impact of this change is felt by understanding telephony. 1994, India had 7 million telephones. Today, it has close to 150 million. It is adding 6 million telephone lines per month. At 70 million lines per year, it is the #1 market in the world for telephony. And it was adding 1 million line per month in 1994-95, barely 10 years back. What has happened? It has happened once we understood that if you want to serve 150 million household, their average paying capability is only $7 per month. So you start with that $7 per month is what they will pay. And you have to build a business which satisfies them and which makes the business some money. And which essentially meant that the infrastructure capital expenses had to be brought down very, very significantly. It used to be $1,000 per line infrastructure expenditure in 1994. Today it's $100. The handset prices are negligible, $40 onwards. And this has suddenly made, once you get there, you suddenly become, the market explodes, as is happening. This is not the first time it has happened. Many of you may know of that in India, in 1992, we had 10 million television. By 95, we had 100 million television. And the key change took place because of two reasons. The first reason is that a black and white television was introduced by a company in India at $50. Now, it is not that everybody actually bought it at $50. But that was a starting point. And the television, which was $100 and $200, it basically brought in a whole lot of people. There were only about 15 to 20 million people who bought at $50 television. But it actually gave the breadth, and you suddenly got the volume. The second important thing that took place is a cable television, which when it was introduced, one had to pay $2 per month. Can you imagine? How do you provide, in $2 per month, how does an operator make money? How does it make money, take care of their capex? What about its opex in $2 per month? Now, it is this, these were the challenges which were met. I can tell you how those challenges were met, but it is when you met that, and of course the content which in India, fortunately, because of the kind of movie industry that we have had for years, was not a problem, and suddenly all the three came together and it grew. And I believe that similar growth, in fact, even on mobile telephony, will grow up to around 200, maybe 250 million, and then we'll suddenly slow down. And we then need to reach rural areas, where the income levels are only about $100 per month. The average revenue per user will not be $7 per month, it will be more like $2 per month. How do you build infrastructure which will enable you to earn money at $2 per month? At half a cent per minute? Today, it is 2 cents per minute, it's half a cent per minute. These are the challenges which kind of lets you use maybe the same technology, but upside down. And if you are able to do that, you build something substantial. Now, today, our operators make money at $7 per month. Nowhere else in the world, any operator makes money at less than $15 per month. Question is, having learned how to do it at $7 per month, are we ready to take on the world? So once it has learned that, is this possible? And this is something that one is imagining, one is looking at. Our business houses are looking at expanding. There are countries which are a little worried about it, that what will happen if the Indian telcos will come. But that's the direction one is moving. In fact, I don't know how many of you know, I was actually party to this whole thing. I was at the board of VSNL, was an advisor to Reliance. We bought Tyco and Flag. Tyco and Flag are two companies which together own 65% of undersea optical fiber around the world. These companies were bought by Indian companies with the objective that as and when this bandwidth will be needed, we are the ones who will have this infrastructure. The companies had invested huge amount of money, $2 to $3 billion, but were bleeding, $100 million per month, per year. And they were losing, and their value was very, very low. These companies came and bought. This is something that we couldn't even have thought of 10 years back. This is what's starting to happen in India. And it is not just telecom industry. Those of you who have traveled to India in recent times would be amazed by the kind of growth that has taken place in airline industry. Now, it is true that our airport infrastructure is terrible. But we'll solve that problem also. Today, the airline industry is booming. Today, at around $35, you can fly from Chennai to Delhi. Something that was unimaginable. Lower middle class people can certainly start to travel by air. It used to be $250 earlier. This is what the cost used to be 2 years back. Once again, what is happening in India which is making these changes one after another? Auto sector. I don't know how many of you have heard of Scorpio, Tata Indica. 99% developed within India. Projects worth $150 million research projects. These are the kind of projects that we are taking and building products which can stand against anyone else. We are already today called the auto component capital of the world. How has this change taking place? What has gone behind it? And today there are some very interesting experiment, public-private experiment to take us further forward. All of you know about IT and IT-enabled services. $28 billion last year, likely to touch $50 billion in a couple of years' time. And many of you must have read this book, The World is Flat. And I remember meeting him last year at the IIT Alumni Association, the author of this book. And I told him, well, if you think that the opportunities have become equal and the world has become flat, you haven't seen it yet. Today you are talking about it because 250 million, 300 million urban people are able to compete. What will happen when the next 700 million rural people are able to come into this market and compete with the others in the world? And that's the changes that we have to look for. These are somewhat visible changes. Anyone who has been reading papers know about this. Let's talk about some of the not so visible changes. I think one of the changes that we probably know of and still does not register to us. We have today 400,000 engineering students graduating every year. The number used to be 25,000 when I went back to India. There are 100 schools, and it was all in public domain. Private schools were not allowed. And though there was a huge desire amongst Indians to study engineering, I'm taking engineering as one example, just we had bottled it up. We are not allowing that. We, of course, did not allow that in the name of quality. And quality is a serious problem. But we opened it up. And the quality of many of these colleges improved. There are uneven quality. There are poor quality ones. There are good quality ones. If the quality is a major problem, we need to solve that. That is the challenge that we have, rather than sort of bottling it up and sort of saying, oh, we will not allow the students to graduate. Because it is this human resources which have built the industry, IT-enabled, IT service industry, IT-enabled services industry over the last 15, 20 years. Without this, India wouldn't have changed. And if you know, many of you may be hearing, oh, South India, all this is happening. North India, it is not happening. Because South India is the one which started all these things, opening up the engineering colleges. I remember 1984, when in Tamil Nadu was the first state which opened this up. Most of us opposed it, and we were wrong. We opposed it saying that quality will suffer. Well, yes, there was a problem of quality, but gradually the quality can be improved. You can't bottle it up. Another very common theme amongst politicians, amongst Indians, that our politics is obstacle to growth. And with the recent reservation debate, I'm sure many of you may be repeating this again and again. But I think it's more of a catch. I've, over the last 20 years, worked within India, have seen many, many governments around the world. And really, there is not much of a difference. We make our mistakes just like anybody else does. We are more ready to correct it. And I'll give you one example. The example of, in telecom sector, which is a sector that I know very well, the 3G licensing in Europe. With a hype surrounding 3G that it will solve all the world's problem, all the operators in Europe bid astronomical high license fee. But since they had bid it and they were awarded the contract, they had no option. The license fee had to be paid. If they go down, let them go down. Most of them had to sell off 70% of their stake to simply survive. British Telecom is now 30% of what it was. So does French Telecom, France Telecom, German Telecom, just to survive. government couldn't do anything. Well, there was a fair bid. It's a democratic country. If we go and help them, somebody will accuse us. India went into a very, very similar situation. 1994, when we opened up Indian Telecom and asked for bidding, astronomically high bids were placed by people. Why? We looked at 250 million, 300 million, 200 million middle class, and we multiplied it by $25 per month. The income levels for that was available, the average revenue per user from telecom that was available in the West. The calculations were all done from here and said, oh, astronomical money can be made. Nobody understood. Even somebody looked at the income levels, one could have said, well, this is not possible. But well, we made the mistake. And since there was huge astronomical bidding, when the operators were awarded license, nobody could actually roll out anything. We almost went into a situation by 98, most of these telecom companies were going bankrupt. We in academia, along with other intelligentsia, took an initiative saying this is not going to work. We went to the Prime Minister, requested him to form a committee, and we were all part of that committee. We changed completely the rules of the games. Even though they had bid hundreds of thousands of billions of dollars, we just sort of say, wave it off, make it a percentage of the total revenue as license fee. And Indian Telecom took off. What I'm trying to sort of say, that our politics seems to be more ready to face reality than many others, in spite of being a democratic country. And no, I won't say in spite, because of being a democratic country. And you see the kind of things that we are doing. I will briefly talk about, among the changes that I'm talking about, I'll talk about some of the work that has been done by our own group. I'll call it a story of TeNeT group, Telecommunications and Computer Network group. It's a group within IIT Madras, a group of faculty, something like 16 or 18 faculty members who have incubated about 18 companies in last 10 to 12 years. Incubating entrepreneurs in a university, balancing economic growth and social development has always been in our mind. And yet, I think we have done something significantly different. Basically, we believed that one of the key learning for us was that if you have big dreams for the nation, entrepreneurship, successful business is the best way to drive these development dreams. This was a big learning for us in 80s. And various events in 80s, whether a small event like selling of shampoo in a sachet or a PCO, operator-assisted PCO, taught us something like this. And by end of 90, we are very firm that it is the successful entrepreneurship which can drive big dreams. And we then started. In 1994, as I pointed out, our group dared to dream that in 10 years' time, we'd like to get 100 million telephones, when we had only 7 million telephones. I remember we were laughed at, that these academicians, they don't know anything. But we just sort of said, we will not give up. We'll work on policy level. The policy was to open it up and allow competition to come in. Since none of our business houses had any experience with telecom, we sort of said, we'll help you grow the telecom companies. That's the reason I got onto the boards of some of these companies. And at the same time, we recognize the primary bottleneck is average revenue per user, CapEx and OpEx does not match. And the key cost is in the local loop. That was the dominant cost. And we knew that as long as you depend on the copper local loop, you cannot get 100 million because the price point will not go down. And the CapEx won't go down, OpEx won't go down. And we created a company called Madras. We introduced the concept of wireless and local loop, drove cellular telephony. And as we crossed 100 million lines last year, Madras crossed $200 million worth of revenue. It may appear to be small, but in Indian context, 1,000 crore rupees is a huge amount of money. We got royalties of the order of $3 million at IIT. And it's something, as far as we are concerned, we made a significant difference to the nation. When we had dreamt of 100 million telephones, we had thought the number is large enough that it will cover all parts of the country and it will cover urban and rural areas. By 2001, it was very clear that this is going to happen. But this is going to happen only in urban areas. Rural areas are going to be left behind. No operator, I was on the board of many of these operators, no operator thought rural areas as a business. And it is here we decided once again to carry out innovation and sort of say, we will work out to connect every village in India. And this time, it was not just technology, but a lot of business model innovation. We sort of said, we'll have a business model very similar to operator-assisted PCO model, which has worked so well in urban areas. We will go to every village, find a local entrepreneur, help them set up an internet kiosks, and get them to drive services. And we are able to do that at $1,200, go to a village and set something like this up. But the most interesting thing is that as we learned how to do it, and we were able to start doing these things, the key question came that, is communication the top priority? Communication was very important. Browsing, email was very important. But the priority in the rural areas was something more. And we soon realized education, healthcare, and livelihood is the key priority. And we sort of said, well, this is the key thing that we need to change. And we changed our vision statement from connecting every village of India to doubling the per capita rural GDP of India. It's a very bold statement. We made that. We are very serious about this. We have made very little progress on it. Just like from 94 to 98, we had made very little progress on 100 million telephones. But we have done lots of preparatory work. For example, we started incubating companies. People sort of say, well, how are you going to do work in rural areas? People are not literate. We said, well, if people are not literate, we'll bring video conferencing. And we worked on a company which do a low bitrate video conferencing, and we started multi-party video conferencing. We started using that as the primary medium of communication, doing all kinds of things. We were told that, well, office package, etc., the minimum thing that you need to do is all in English. And we created a company called CK Shakti, which came at a fraction of a cost, Indian language office package. In 8 languages, we actually did office, spreadsheet. So we had a word processing, spreadsheet, email client, database, and we actually were able to provide something like that, which was key. We are already using video conferencing to connect patients in the village to doctors in the urban areas. And it was being used effectively. And when we went back to the doctors that, are you satisfied with it? They said, yes, but only if I could measure the temperature of the patient, or if I could get the pulse. And we created another company called Neurosynaptic, which made a device, which now we introduced at the kiosk. It has a remote stethoscope. The stethoscope is put in the rural areas. The person and the doctor in the urban area hears the heartbeat along with the video conferencing. It can do remote temperature measurement, remote blood pressure measurement, pulse count, ECG monitoring. The key thing is this device costs only $300. Created a company, started doing this. We recognize that if you want to make a difference in rural areas, we need to create enterprises, micro-enterprises in rural India, for which we need to take finance to the villages. And we started working with banks. Why can't you now, with the internet being available, do banking in the rural areas? And the bank sort of said, yes, we could do that. But you know, in India, you need to deliver physical notes. Only if I could put an ATM in each village. But the ATM costs $20,000. For a small village of 1,000 population, $20,000 makes no sense. We took up the challenge and created a company called Vortex, which came up with an ATM. And we are today selling this ATM at between $1,200 and $1,600. It has a fingerprint authentication. It works with soil nodes. Now one will say, why soil nodes? One of the most interesting things that we learned in the village is that when we took it to the village, and we had taken a new machine with brand new notes, and somebody withdrew the money, looked at the note, and sort of said, is it genuine? We said, why are you asking this question? Go to the shop. He went to the shop, and the shopkeepers refused to take that, saying that doesn't look like genuine. And we sort of said, well, if it's a soiled note, it has passed through so many hands. If it has passed through so many hands, it gives us confidence. And suddenly we went back to the drawing board, that the key to development is not just for the new notes, but for the soil notes. And most ATM machines don't work, that whole technology doesn't work. And we had to work on it. It took us 6 months, but we did that. To try to make agriculture, and this is just the beginning, we have created another group which has developed a complete weather monitoring station. At each kiosk now, we put something like this, measures the temperature, the pressure, the wind speed, the wind speed, the rainfall, humidity. Completely it measures, and on internet, it's now stored in a central place, costing only $250. Again, a lot of innovation. The interesting thing is that something like this enables us to do many, many things. One, micro weather prediction. Number two, we have introduced a very interesting concept called rainfall insurance. In a village, in agriculture, the only uncontrolled variable, every other variable is a controlled variable. The only uncontrolled variable is rainfall. And we sort of said, well, that is on which we need insurance. So if the amount of rainfall in a village is less than a certain amount, you have a certain payout. If it's above a certain amount, you don't have a payout. And it's an alternative to crop insurance. And we're finding that much less cheating goes on, and it really works much, much better. Well, this is what we are doing in rural areas. 100 million phones were already happening in urban areas. And the question then, in rural areas, of course, we had to do many more things. Driving education was one of the key things. Micro franchise, IT-enabled services, telemedicine. I can go on, but this is not the talk on which I'm primarily going to talk on rural areas. One of the most interesting things that we are trying to do is using the IT infrastructure in the rural area to outsource distributed production. Making of wine bags, making of embroidery. And unfortunately, I can't show you this slide. My laptop doesn't work with this. But it's a very, very interesting slide I wanted to show you, that we are now taking IT-enabled services to the rural areas. This particular slide would have shown you an animation of a work done in 4 villages, where it's an educational work which had flash. It required translation into local language. It required voice recording. And it required synchronization and putting up the product. This has been done in 4 different villages and delivered to a client in urban areas by something like this. If India has become so confident by actually delivering services from urban India to the West. If we can take this to the rural areas, and if in rural areas with computer and connectivity available, with young people, very determined, hardworking people, if they can start delivering services, will change the rural India. And this is what we are trying to do. Coming back to the urban areas, once 100 million telephones were done, we sort of said, well, we like to see broadband happen, because broadband is highly enabling. Education, commerce, entertainment. And we have hardly 2 million broadband connections today, 2.2, 2.3. So we sort of said we'd like to see 50 million broadband connections in the next 5 years' time. And we are doing everything. On the one hand, we are working, Madras got converted into a broadband connectivity player. And it is coming with all kinds of innovative technology, wireless, DSL, cable wireless, understanding the Indian kind of situation, understanding the Indian price point. This is a company which is actually driving connectivity. At the same time, something which may be of immense interest to you, that we have created a company called Noatium, which is driving a network PC, a multimedia thin client. Now this, if there is a broadband, the servers are located in the urban area, with the telcos, and this is there at the house. This has no storage. It's a device which can be turned on and turned off. And therefore no issue of maintenance, no issue of upgradation, no issue of backups, and very, very low cost. We are looking at $80 to $90 plus the cost of the monitor. How have we done that? We have done that by doing something very interesting. We have actually moved away from x86 device by Intel. We have actually used a processor that is used in cell phone, a digital signal processor, and developed the whole client using that DSP. What does the DSP enables us to do? It enables us to not only put, first of all, it enables us to do all the multimedia in the front end. Audio coding, video coding, audio decoding, video decoding. That itself is the primary CPU power, otherwise the server would have taken. We do all the graphics and screen handling in the front end. And of course, all the mouse and keyboard and all that. And file storage and number crunching, otherwise is done in the back end. This concept is just starting to pick up, I believe can make an immense difference, because today we are using the DSP of today's generation. In 6 months' time, instead of 130 nanometer device, we'll actually get a 90 nanometer technology in that device. And soon we'll get a 65 nanometer, and we can build it to be as powerful as any other PC. With no more than 1.5 megabit per second to 1 to 1.5 megabit per second, which is required for bringing the MPEG-4 kind of movie as the broadband connectivity. So this is the kind of thing that we are trying to drive. We believe that something like this is extremely important, the concept of network computing, concept of shared computing. We are taking the shared computing, the server is shared, the software is shared, the device is now at home, instead of device being at a cyber cafe. That's a concept that we are actually introducing. What are the dream with which we are working on? We want to create couple of billion-dollar product companies out of India. And I remember about a year back, I introduced this concept to my group, and everybody reacted that what's happened to Jhunjhunwala. He first talks about in dollar, and then he talks in $1 billion. We are a university. This is not our dream. And I told them something different. I told them, see, look at what's happening to the telecom product companies from the West, whether it's a Nortel or Ericsson or Lucent, Alcatel, Siemens. They're all receding. Because the key expansion is taking in emerging market, and they're not able to compete. Who is winning there? Huawei, ZTE from China. This is an opportunity for Indian companies to become that big. And we are probably in the best position to drive those opportunities. And we are looking at companies like Madras doing all kind of innovation. We are looking at companies like Tejas that we have created, doing some very interesting work in STM1416, tying up with Nortels of the world or Motorola's of the world, competing against Huawei, ZTE, growing rapidly into something very significant companies. How do you leverage this changing India? Let me give a few thoughts. One of the things, for example, there is a very strong desire throughout the country amongst youngsters, amongst intelligentsia, amongst even politicians, scientists, that can we now think of becoming leaders in a few technology areas? We have done well, but we are still not leaders amongst the leaders. There's not necessarily that you can be number one, number two. And we believe that these are, again, something that TeNeT has to drive, at least in one area or maybe two areas, can we try to push ourselves into leadership. Wireless is one such area that we have identified, and we believe there is a real opportunity in 8 to 10 years to become amongst the leaders. We have a very interesting thing that we are trying to do just outside IIT Madras, build a research park, very similar to Stanford Research Lab. We have seen the bringing together the faculty, students, and industry R&D personals together. What does it do? Both in terms of innovation, incubation, entrepreneurship, as well as driving established companies. And we went to the government, we were able to get a land, we are building this facility, and we're hoping companies like yours can come and set up their R&D facility, work jointly with IIT. The back gate of this goes to IIT, and it becomes extended campus. These are the kind of things that we need to do. These are successful. In US, you have seen not just Stanford Research Lab. If you go to the technology highway next to MIT and Harvard, if you go to the North Carolina Triangle, you will go to the South Florida Research Park. These are kind of things that have been successful, and we are hoping to do something like this. Let me come to some other challenging problems, which we probably haven't sufficiently given thoughts to. And they are very serious problems, and we need to really come to it. And we believe technology can do a lot in something like this. For example, 20 million children enter school every year in India. They get very poor education, most of them, because they have very poor infrastructure, very poor teachers. And teachers cannot be created overnight. If you don't attend to this, we'll end up into serious trouble. Can we use technology to overcome the shortcomings and find solutions? In a very similar manner, I talked about college education. And I'm not talking about now just engineering. Huge, 2 million people going to college. Most of the colleges have very poor teachers. But there's enough very good teachers. Can we use technology to enable, in absence of sufficient quantity of good teachers? We are fairly focused on making India a product house. conceptualize, build, and drive new products from India. Use Indian talent, use Indian academia. We are very clear that one of the key strategy has to be to develop product for ourselves, not for the Western market, for the emerging market. Because if you develop that, you will develop it at a very different price point. You develop it at that price point, you are the leaders. You are the leader. Because once you develop it at that price point, you can go anywhere else in the world. It has to be tested sufficiently in India. If you straight away go to the West, well, those corporations which do that have to be actually driven from the West, not from India. Dreams like 50 million broadband connections should be TeNeT dreams. These are the dreams that Google should drive. This will really create huge market. And what are the kind of innovations that are required? We are doing a lot of innovations. These are kind of dreams that it drive. Or doubling the per capita rural GDP. Once again, has to be nation's dream. Has to be dreams of lots and lots of people within India and outside. And 10 years we'll get there. We will have to do lots of things. For example, the key bottleneck in this is not going to come from other things. It's going to come from power, distributed power generation. 25 kilowatt to 100 kilowatt power plant in every village. Grid electrical power reaches, but our supply, our generation is always less than the demand. And it will be all sapped in urban areas. Only the leftovers will go to the rural areas as and when there is a surplus. No industry can thrive in rural India with something like this. Can we have a distributed 100 kilowatt power plant, whether it is solar power plant or a biogas or a biodiesel, whatever, or wind? These are challenges that we have to do. Today, it is possible to start moving in that direction. There are ventures that can be set up. You don't need to be an expert in these areas. You need to be a very general expert and a determined entrepreneur to solve this kind of problem. And these are something that can grow, because certainly you will do it in 600,000 villages. And you need to have a business model of actually running these plants, somebody running these plants and distributing power. Well, I'll just take 1 minute about this, because I don't know how many of you know about a program called National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. It's one of the largest social programs ever designed anywhere else in the world. It is a very simple program that every household in India, rural household in India, will be given a minimum of 100 days guaranteed employment. Now, the number of households are large, 170 million. So it's a very, 150 million. It's a very powerful program. Now, one may sort of say, does this kind of give out really work? I mean, of course, all of us react to it. But remember that if you can do something like this, first of all, it will eliminate hunger. And eliminating hunger is extremely critical. I learned this from one of my teachers 15 years back. Tamil Nadu introduced this noon meal scheme in 1985. In simple, that when you go to school, middle of the day, you are going to be given one meal. If Tamil Nadu today is doing so well, and then Andhra and Karnataka is doing so well, all of them introduce that one after another. It is because of this. Because certainly, when you feed children who are otherwise going hungry, you are making sure that their brain develops. This program could theoretically build rural infrastructure. It can significantly add to the rural income. The biggest problem is most of us believe that there will be huge leakage and hardly anything will go to the rural areas. That's the reason many of us are opposed to this program. And we, of course, want it a very time-limited and become... And can we use technology to overcome something like this? Leakage, corruption. There are many things that has happened in India where technology can be used. I can talk more and more about it. I'll stop here by just sort of saying that India has changed immensely over the last 10 years. It is not 12, 15 years. It's not the same India. It is a very confident India. I often sort of say, I went to IIT Kanpur, one of the best schools in the country, had some of the best teachers in the world. Very good. But you know, one thing that even from my best teachers, I sort of say, technology is something that the West can do. Today, I find youngsters coming to our institutes or any other institute, they feel they are as good as anyone else in the world. That confidence has come in India. I'm sure that has come in China. This is what is making the world flat. that confidence? Can we capitalize on this? And what I also pointed out, that while immense number of things are being done, we have immense number of problems. I'm not trying to list most of them. This is a time where those who care, not just for India, this is the problem. If we solve the problems for India, we'll actually be solving the problem for the half of the world, or 65% of the world, which has been otherwise deprived. And most of us, people like you, have immense capability. I think question is, are we willing to get into this and do something which will be driven by entrepreneurship spirit, but something which can change the world? I believe that's the Google spirit, and I'm come here requesting you to participate in that. Thank you very much. Any questions, comments, discussions?
Thank you for coming, Dr. Jhunjhunwala. When I left India for the first time, this was in '92. It was still taking years and years to get a telephone line. And I lived in India last year, and I was extremely surprised to get a telephone line in one day. So I do know what you mean by it's a changed India. I've also been to one of your N-Log kiosks in rural Karnataka. And my question to you is that you seem to be doing the last mile through RF. And not very far from this kiosk, I saw those orange milestones that BSNL puts up where they lay fiber. So I was shocked to find out that 80 to 90% of the fiber is unused. So is there anything happening with BSNL and the dark fiber being lit up?
All right. There is huge fiber in India going to every taluk headquarters. Does not go beyond that. Taluk headquarters, which is like a county headquarters. Every 15 to 20 kilometer radius, you'll find at the center of that a town where the fiber goes. The fiber used to only belong to BSNL. Today, you'll find at least 2 operators bringing the fiber. BSNL or Tata, Reliance, Bharti. As soon as you have introduced competition, everybody has started changing. A year back, it was almost impossible. Connectivity at that particular point used to be so expensive that my whole income of the kiosk will go into something like that. And it used to be very poor connectivity. 6 months back, we switched over to another operator in all these places. Things changed. Today, not just that operator, but BSNL also provides almost as good a service. What I'm trying to point out that there has to be ways. You can go on knocking your head against a wall. It sometimes doesn't solve the problem.
What's the price point?
Price point has significantly dropped. All that I can say is about 1/5 the price point that we used to pay till about a year back. We today are able to get a 64 kilobit per second drop or 128 kilobit per second drop, approximately at 100,000 rupees. So we have built our own rural backbone. We are in 32 locations today. We have our access center, and we have built our own location thing. We can take 256, 512, whatever we want, 2 Mbps as the demand grows. And it is not really very, very expensive. And then we actually provide 150 to 200 kiosks in that area. That's the way we are doing it. Yeah, price points have dropped very significantly. I think today it is almost okay, but price points are going to further drop. I'm not worried about that anymore. We have learned that introducing competition is one of the best way to try to deal with incumbent, particularly government-owned functionaries. They will either become irrelevant or they will cooperate.
What is the legal status of private power generation in India? Can I generate power and feed it to the grid?
Good question. 2 years back, it was not allowed. Today, the bill has been passed in the parliament, and you are allowed to generate power and distribute it. There are still some licensing issues which are being sorted out. By the time we really solve this problem, we'll sort this out. Nothing in India happens very fast. You need to do things, understand, particularly when you deal with politics and you deal with bureaucracy. You need to be on it. You need to plan it, be on it. The right things are done.
So thanks for the talk. This was most wonderful, and it was really exciting to see the changes you're talking about and the vision and ambition that you have for everything going on in India. On the last slide, you ended with a call to us as individuals and us at Google to participate in this vision that you're painting here and the changes that are going on. Did you have any ideas about specific ways that both individuals and companies can participate in what you've outlined?
This is one of our failures, that we still have not been able to get individuals to participate well. Maybe our own limitation. Maybe we have to brainstorm. Maybe we have to think about it. Maybe some of you have to. Because some of us don't understand what you can actually do, how much time or energy or other things. Companies like Google, I think I have a better understanding. They need to promote almost every single thing that I pointed out. Can this be a project that can be done between Google and IIT Madras, TeNeT Group, that will how to train 20 million children? I'm sure one can at least make an attempt at it. We may not succeed. Doesn't matter. Can we take how to make a significant difference to the college education? Dreams like doubling the per capita rural GDP. Can you create a group? It's more difficult for us. Can you create a group in, first Google officially, but can you create a group here who will work with us? There are 10, 15 serious people. Broadbanding India. It could be a group which can work with us, brainstorm, and then find whatever needs to be done. Individually, it becomes a little more difficult when individually you write. I mean, our bandwidth gets limited. We are already trying to do probably too many things. Many of the things we are messing it up. I don't want to paint rosy picture. I think we mess up lots of things. Only things that we have learned to learn. I've been given signal that I have only 1 more minute.
You mentioned that the telecom industry, actually the mobile telephone industry, had a lot of technical innovations and business model innovations to get to the price point that they did. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I think very, very interesting. One of the companies that I will talk about is Bharti. 2 years back, they decided that they will outsource all their IT work. All their IT work, including billing, customer care, complete IT systems, etc., to a company. And believe it or not, it was IBM. Outsource it to IBM, not by paying them anything, saying that you manage for my whole network, complete this. You put in your investment, you put in your money, you put your equipment, take a fraction of the total revenue. So if I'm getting $7, maybe I'll give you 30 cents out of it. I mean, this is the first step that they took. One of my students who did PhD with me, one of my students was driving this program. First year was a total mess because they got their experts within IBM to come and define the kind of infrastructure that is required. And remember that this is a company which tries to sell infrastructure. So they try to maximize, not optimize. So they sold to themselves huge amount of infrastructure. And they bleeded like anything at the end of 1 year. And then I remember he came to me and sort of said, this will not work. What do we do? We sort of say, you throw all these consultants out. Look for totally different who know how to optimize. You need to reduce cost. And they worked out. And since it's a large company, it was able to work it out. The second year they made money. Same thing was repeated, sort of saying all my base station, etc., is outsourced to, let's say, Ericsson. I don't remember which company. They did that. They put their thing, they'll get certain cents out of my ARPU. Very interesting innovation business model. And not giving it to smaller company, giving it to the top class multinational who has the wherewithal to find solution to problem like this. And finally, as you grow, so today, the whole business model of Bharti is that I will only own the license and own the customers. And the backbone, nothing else. Everything is going to be outsourced. Very interesting business model, bringing in efficiency. Of course, they also did a lot of work was done to try to optimize infrastructure. A lot of optimization of infrastructure, a lot of use of local stuff as much as possible. Those were parts of it. Beyond that, we need to do a one-to-one discussion to get into it. I just gave you one example. For example, one of the things that they decided not to use a single Cisco switch. Till that time, they were using only Cisco switch. IBM recommended the 3Com switch. No, not even 3Com. I think that company from Taiwan that which does one of the cheapest switch. I don't remember the name. But they use their switches. I mean, simply when you want to optimize, you sort of say, okay, you'll throw it out after 2 years rather than upfront load it and then bleed. I guess my time is over. So I'm being given signal my time is over. I'm, however, available to you informally right now for a little while if you want to discuss something. But thank you very much for inviting me and letting me give my talk. Sorry that 1 or 2 slides I couldn't show you properly. Thank you very much. Bye.